In part 1, I referenced an anthology of essays by a group called Insight, Women of Color Against Violence. Much of this part of the series is based on one of the essays featured in it, called Social Service or Social Change: Who Benefits from Your Work, by Paul Kivel, from the year 2000.
My first answer to the question posed in the title is that we need both, of course. We need to provide services for those most in need, for those trying to survive, for those barely making it. We need to work for social change so that we create a society in which our institutions and organisations are equitable and just, and all people are safe, adequately fed, adequately housed, well educated, able to work at safe, decent jobs, and able to participate in the decisions that affect their lives. Although the title of this article may be misleading in contrasting social service provision and social change work, the two don't necessarily go together easily, and in many instances don't go together at all. There are some groups working for social change that are providing social service. There are many more groups providing social services that are not working for social change. In fact, many social service agencies may be intentionally or inadvertently working to maintain the status quo.
I'll link Kivel's essay in the description because it's worth a read, but those opening paragraphs sum up his entire argument. But I'm going to try to elaborate on that argument with a historical example, and in particular, when the American economy was driven primarily by the enslavement of Africans. Hopefully, illustrating my point with this example isn't too offensive, but I'm open to feedback on this, and I'm welcome to it in the comments. The year is 1852, and there are about 1.5 million slaves in America. State officials, plantation owners, medical doctors, academics, clergy, and other important members of society have recently come together to discuss a rise in noticeable forms of suffering being experienced by the slaves. A rise in drapetomania, a condition in which slaves feel an uncontrollable urge to run away from the plantations, has been diagnosed in increasing numbers by physicians and psychiatrists, as well as a condition called dysesthesia ethiopica, I think. The rare disorder of when slaves become lazy and unmotivated, less productive, and altogether pouty and sad-looking. The slaves are being struck with an epidemic of sadness, fear, hopelessness, powerlessness, laziness, rapid and sudden fits of rage, bouts of sobbing and crying, hanging their heads low. The beasts, unable to control themselves like we whites are able. I've heard of slaves who can't get an hour of sleep at night. Ones who can only force down 2 morsels of food into their mouths in a whole day after a day's of work. Something's got to be done, to get them some kind of help. After some lively discussion, the group of Southern leaders form a new nonprofit called
the F.R.E.E. Initiative. Freedom to relax and enjoy the environment.
Between 1852 and 1853, the F.R.E.E. Initiative raises thousands of dollars, which during that time was a lot of money. And with that money, they build a huge ecosystem of social services throughout the South, specifically for slaves. These services include counseling and psychiatric services, medical care, vocational skills training, meditation and yoga classes, and other kinds of services. F.R.E.E. even has an auxiliary committee led by all women, wives of plantation owners, who have started a gardening initiative. With this project, women plant pretty flowers nearby the slave headquarters on the plantations, because research by graduate students at the nonprofit University Harvard, formed in the year 1636, shows that access to colorful flowers and proximity to their pleasant scent reduces stress and increases joy. The F.R.E.E. Initiative eventually wins a number of humanitarian awards for its achievements in improving the lives of these suffering slaves, and eventually formalizes partnerships with universities to study the impacts of the F.R.E.E. Initiative on the quality of life of the slaves in hopes of potentially expanding and exporting this innovative new model to other parts of the world, where colonized people are also demonstrating similar symptoms as they are in the American South. Some research questions universities are asking, with the help of generous funding by plantation owners, are: which services are evidenced to reduce symptoms of runaway slave syndrome most effectively? Which medicines help slaves feel more motivated and to focus better when they're working on the plantations? If the presence of pretty flowers on the plantation relieves the stress of slaves, are there particular colors that have more impact than other colors? Over time, the F.R.E.E. Initiative develops an entire industrial complex community of service providers, which really actually does make the slaves feel just a little bit better. This community includes research and development partnerships with universities, annual conferences with keynote speakers and award ceremonies, books and other media to be sold at said conferences, nonprofit management training workshops, the development of professional associations focused on legal and educational resources for nonprofit professionals, media circuits where middle-class nonprofit professionals are able to speak on podcasts, TV shows, make their own YouTube channels.
Isn't this the fucking 1850s?
Oh, yeah, right. Thanks, John.
But anyway, geez, why wouldn't the so-called F.R.E.E. initiative just get behind the abolition movement?
Well, yeah, that's the point I'm making. If your primary emphasis on solving social problems is to throw social services at them, you might not actually be impacting any form of meaningful social change that actually solves the social problems. Erica Cole Arenas refines this distinction between social services versus social change, framing it instead as self-help versus self-determination. This is a really interesting concept she came upon in her study of the evolution of the migrant farm worker movement of the 1960s, basically before and after it got funded by these people. Megan Ming Francis looks at a different historical movement, arguably the movement for Black Lives, as it's called today, but starting all the way back from when the NAACP was formed nearly 100 years ago. She points out something very similar that happened once Black people's radical demands began to shift direction as soon as they started receiving funding from... And her term for this phenomenon is movement capture.
Hey, so what's part 6 going to be about?
Join us next time for part 6, movement capture. Thank you for the voiceovers, Space Commune as John, Paul Morrin in the beginning, and Laborkyle and his dog barking midway through. Thank you to my patrons, Kelgore Trout, Nicholas Mastello, Katie Drax, Davey MK, Diane Prado, Lauren, Garbage Possum, Space Commune, Ashley Altman, Pablo Ruiz, Ulrich Volker Anderson, Jamie Smith, Dylan Yee, Laborkyle, Isabel Abdullali, Dirt Knight, L, Halim Al-Ra, Wes, Leo Samalati, Bryden Beck, Lauren Dale, Noah, Esmail Ferre, Ace, Super Arjuna Butt, Sebastian Nitu, Watson Kia, Richard G,